The council chamber gleamed like a sterile taunt, its metal walls and floating glass panels a smug testament to a galaxy that sneered at humanity's scars. Delegates hovered in their seats, tentacled clithers smirking through their beaks, crystalline sirens humming disdain. Gaseous idle pulsing with silent scorn united in their loathing. Captain Lena Harker stood at the center, her patched uniform and weathered face a defiant stain amid their pristine elegance. Her short-cropped hair framed eyes that had seen the collapse up close to human. For this polished crowd, the Vorran delegate rose, oily skin glinting under the chamber's lights, his predatory eyes narrowing. Humanity's request is absurd, he hissed, voice smooth as venom. A volatile species barely past crawling dares to sit among us. Lena's fist tightened, a memory flickering. Her brothers scream as their colony burned. The council's silence deafening. She shoved it down. Beside her, Asha leaned in, voice low. For my sister's kids on Praxis 4, Lena, you've got this. Boots ringing on the floor, Lena faced the Vorran. We're not begging. We've earned this. Survived the collapse you ignored. Won the Scareth War you fled. Humanity stands when you'd have us, Ash. Murmurs rippled. A Clither delegate clicked its beak. Crude ships, cruder minds, but Lena didn't flinch. The Vorran waved a claw, guards shifting at the doors. You're pests, a threat to order. We've buried your kind before. His words dripped with a secret weight, chilling the air. Lena stepped closer, voice a blade. Bury us again, and you'll choke on the dirt. We'll rise higher than you fear, and you'll remember this day. A threat, the Vorran sneered. A promise, she snapped, turning to her crew. Ash's jaw was set, eyes blazing with the fire of a woman who'd lost too much. That fire was humanity's Alani, and it would burn this galaxy away. Lena knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The human fleet shrugged warships and patched up freighters shuttled in the void, lights flickering like the last gasps of a dying fire. Captain Lena Harker stood on the Peregrine's bridge, eyes locked on the Vayu screen. The council's rejection still a bitter tang in her throat. Her brother's last transmission hold the line. Lena looped in her mind, steadying her. Feels like a trap, Sergeant Milo growled from the doorway, rubbing a scar on his jaw from the Scareth War. Council shuts us out, now this. They're not subtle. Lena's gut agreed, a cold knot tightening. The hum of the ship's systems was her only anchor as the crew moved in quiet, weary rhythm. Diplomacy was dead. Survival was all they had left. The comms crackled. Captain, incoming signature rest for an assault fleet. Massive. They're gunning for us. Her neck prickled. The Vorrans weren't just flexing, they were erasing. Course for Praxis 4, she snapped, fist tight. Ash's kin are there. We evacuate, then fight. Ash's face paled, but her voice held. 10 minutes out. They've got numbers. Firepower can't match them straight up. Lena's mind raced, rejecting textbook tactics. We don't. We rig a freighterful burn, fake our signature. They chase it, we slip behind. Got their command ship with a jury-rigged dump. No leaders, no fleet. Milo grinned, dark and sharp. Crazy as hell. I'm in. Good, Lena said, eyes like ice. Because losing isn't an option. The Peregrine and the rest of the fleet jumped into hyperdrive, racing toward the colony as the Vorran ships loomed closer. The eerie silence of space was now filled with the ominous crackling of weapon systems being armed, the metallic hum of humanity's last line of defense. As they approached the colony's perimeter, the first wave of Vorran ships appeared in the distance. The massive silhouettes of sleek, battle-hardened vessels glinted menacingly in the cold light of distant stars. Brace for impact, Lena barked. All hands, battle stations. The first shots rang out across the blackness. Bright streaks of violet energy that shattered the darkness. A series of explosions bloomed across the distant colony, sending debris scattering into the void. The Vorrans didn't waste time. They'd come to annihilate. The human fleet scrambled into formation, firing back in desperate waves. Missiles flew, lasers cut through the vacuum, and the Peregrine shuddered as enemy fire connected. But Lena didn't flinch. She couldn't. She had her people to lead. Priya, target their lead ship, Lena ordered, her voice hard. We need to disable their comms. Now, in the heart of the Peregrine, Priya, the ship's chief engineer, was already at work. Her hands flying over her station, tearing into the systems with her characteristic frenzy. Sparks flew from the control panels, but she didn't flinch. I've got it. Locking on the lead ship now. A loud bang rang through the ship as the first Vorran ship took a hit, its shields flickering before a massive explosion tore through its hull. The alien ship veered off course, its command center dark. Direct hit, Priya shouted. They're blind. They can't communicate. Lena allowed herself a brief nod of approval before turning back to the comms. Now we move. Target their remaining vessels. Don't give them a chance to regroup. But the enemy was relentless. Another Vorran ship appeared in the distance, larger and more advanced than the first. This wasn't a fleet anymore. This was a mess of humanity was nothing but an obstacle in the way of their galactic peace. Lena's face hardened, her hands gripping the command console. Take it down. Do whatever it takes. A massive barrage of firepower erupted from the Peregrine, tearing into the alien ship's shields and hull. The battle was chaotic, brutal, but in that moment, Lena saw a flicker of hope. Humans might have been underestimated, but they could fight. The Peregrine drifted through the blackness, a quiet hope amidst the fractured remnants of the battle. In the distance, debris from destroyed Vorran ships glinted like the shattered bones of fallen titans. The air in the bridge was thick with the tension of survival. The ship's crew worked in a frantic rhythm, but the real fight was far from over. Lena Harker stood at the center of it all, hands clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the swirling chaos outside. We lost 5 more ships, Sergeant Milo muttered from his station, voice grim. Another wave coming in. Lena didn't acknowledge him. Her mind was elsewhere. The Vorran were smart. They wouldn't just strike humanity down. They would make them disappear from history entirely. That much was clear from the Council's rejection. This wasn't about space. It was about humanity's existence. They had been erased before, and she'd be damned if that happened again. Priya, she called, glancing over at her chief engineer. Anything on that archive we found? Any clue as to how we could turn this around? Priya looked up from her terminal, her eyes wide with the weight of the question. She was one of the few who had gone with Lena to investigate the ancient space station, the one buried deep in a forgotten sector, the one where they had found more than just old machinery. There's more to it, Priya said, her voice tinged with disbelief. A lot more. Didn't want to say it over comms, but she trailed off, looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to overhear. The other crew members on the bridge kept their heads down, pretending to focus on their tasks. Lena stepped closer. What did you find? Priya hesitated, fingers pausing over her console. The station wasn't just a research outpost, it was part of something much larger. A network hidden deep in the old archives. It's a deshuman. But not our kind of human. I'm talking about something that predates us. Lena frowned. What do you mean? Predates us how? Priya's face tightened, her voice lowering to a near whisper. This data goes back thousands of years, Lena. The humans who built this were more advanced than we are now. Far more advanced. They had technological weapons capable of erasing entire civilizations. She paused, meeting Lena's eyes. And they didn't just disappear, they were wiped out by someone. A power that doesn't want us to know what happened. A power that's still alive. Lena's chest tightened. The implications of Priya's words were staggering. The Vorrans, Lena said, her voice low and dangerous. They knew. They always knew. Not just the Vorrans, Priya said, shaking her head. I think they all knew. The Council. The ones who've kept us out. They've been covering up our existence for millennia. Lena turned, pacing now, her thoughts racing. So this is bigger than we thought. We're not just fighting for a seat at the table, we're fighting for our place in history. Priya nodded, her fingers flying across the console. I'm accessing more files now, but the data is fragmented. If I can piece it together, we might be able to find something that gives us an edge, something hidden. Something the Council never wanted us to discover. Lena's eyes narrowed. How long? Priya met her gaze, her face lit by the glow of the screen, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Give me an hour, maybe 2. Lena nodded. "Get it done. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for a legacy." As Priya worked in silence, Lena turned her gaze back to the stars outside. The Vorran fleet was still out there, hunting. But now, Lena had something the Vorrans didn't count on: the truth. Humanity wasn't just a survivor in this galaxy. They were a descendant of something powerful. And now it was time to remind the galaxy exactly what they had buried. The Peregrine floated in the dark, the hum of the engines the only sound in the otherwise silent bridge. Lena stood at the helm, her hands folded behind her back, staring out into the endless black. The Vorran fleet had been repelled barely, but the cost was steep. 5 more human ships had been lost, and the outer colonies were still burning. The galaxy hadn't just rejected humanity, it had drawn its line in the sand. Lena's fingers itched for action, but the war had taken a toll on her crew. They were bruised, battered, and on the edge of breaking. But there was no time to mourn. The Vorrans weren't done. The Council wasn't done. And humanity was about to show them all what it meant to be underestimated. "Captain," Lieutenant Asha called from her station, her voice tight. "I've sent out the message to every surviving faction. There's no response from the Scari or Idle, but the Tornath have agreed to meet. They want to negotiate a truce." Lena turned slowly, eyeing Asha. "A truce?" she asked, her voice hard. "We're fighting for our survival, not making deals." "I know," Asha said, hands hovering over the controls. "But some of them are looking for a way out. They don't want to be caught in the middle of a war they didn't ask for." Lena's jaw clenched. She understood the sentiment. The Tornath had always been neutral, always played both sides to their advantage. They weren't loyalty or survivors. But right now, survival was the same as surrender. And Lena wasn't about to let humanity be some chess piece in a galactic game they didn't choose to play. "No," she said firmly. "Tell them we'll meet but we don't negotiate. We're done with that." Asha hesitated, but nodded. "Understood." Lena turned back to the viewport, her thoughts clouded with the weight of what they were about to face. Humanity had been cornered. The Vorrans would come again, and next time, it wouldn't be a few skirmishes to bring their full might. And that wasn't counting the other races in the Council, who had already turned their backs on humanity. The galaxy's rejection was final. But what if it didn't have to be? "Priya," Lena called over her shoulder. The ship's engineer had been working nonstop in the lab, but now she appeared in the doorway, her eyes tired but determined. "What is it, Captain?" Lena's expression hardened. "I want you to keep digging through that archive. There has to be something more we can use. We can't keep fighting like this, we need an edge." Priya didn't need further explanation. Her eyes lit up with a spark of purpose, her fatigue suddenly replaced by the fire of discovery. "I'll get to it right away." Lena turned back to Asha. "Set course for the Tornath fleet, but make it clear this isn't about alliances. It's about survival. We'll do it on our terms." Asha hesitated. "You're sure about this? We might just burn our last bridge with them." "I'm sure," Lena said. "If we're going to win this war, we need more than just survival. We need to make the galaxy fear what happens when they underestimate humanity." As the ship's engines hummed to life, the crew took their positions. Lena didn't have any illusions about what was coming. The Vorrans would come for them with everything they had. And the Council? They were waiting for the humans to fall, so they could wipe them out once and for all. But Lena wasn't going to let that happen. Not without a fight. She looked out at the stars again, her voice low and determined. "We're not begging for a seat anymore. We're taking it." The Peregrine had barely limped into the asteroid belt when the Vorran fleet found them. Lena had seen the maneuvering coordinates. They had been cornered in a strip of space, littered with rock and metal. The perfect graveyard. She gritted her teeth as the alarms blared across the ship, the shrill, insistent sound cutting through the quiet hum of their bruised fleet. "Report," Lena barked, her voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. Lieutenant Asha, pale and sweating from the strain, didn't look up from her console. "They're closing in, Captain." At least 10 Vorran ships. We're outgunned. Again. I can't guarantee. Don't tell me what you can't do. Asha. Tell me what we will do. Lena snapped, voice sharp as a blade. She turned to Sergeant Milo, standing near the rear of the bridge. Milo, get to the weapons deck. Priya, how long until we can get a full recharge on the shields? Priya's voice crackled over the comms before Lena could even finish speaking. 3 minutes. Maybe 4 if I don't burn out the core. But if you're planning to survive on that, I'd suggest. Do it, Lena commanded, her voice calm. She knew they were walking on the edge, but there was no other choice. Everyone else, listen up. This isn't just about getting out alive anymore. This is about showing them who we are. The crew went silent, a collective understanding hanging in the air. A few moments of hurried preparation passed in tense silence, each person already knowing their part. There was no turning back now. We'll use the rocks, Lena muttered, half to herself. She glanced back out the view screen where the looming Vorran ships were already locking on their weapons, glowing points of deadly light shining against the dark expanse of space. They won't expect it. Lena's plan was risky, insane, and brutally human. The asteroid belt wasn't just a trap, it was the perfect cover. The Vorrans might have superior technology, but humanity had something else. The ability to think fast, to improvise, to fight dirty. No fleet, no matter how powerful, could account for that. Engage evasive maneuvers, Lena ordered, her voice unwavering. The ship lurched as the crew followed her lead, dodging chunks of rock and debris while maintaining speed toward a dense sector of the asteroid belt. As they approached the heart of the cluster, Lena's crew worked quickly, manipulating the ship's sensors and stealth tech to mask their signature. They'd set a tropa decoy. They'd use the last of their spare energy to rig a small freighter to mimic the Peregrine's heat signature, sending it careening off at full speed into the midst of the Vorran fleet. Fire everything we have left, Lena roared. The Peregrine erupted into life, firing volleys of shots from every turret, every laser cannon they could spare. The Vorrans took the bait, launching full salvos at the decoy, their shots illuminating the asteroid field in a cacophony of explosive energy. But as they tore the freighter to pieces, Lena and her crew moved in behind them, slipping past the distracted ships like ghosts. Mila's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, we're in position. I'm going for the lead ship's hull. They won't see it coming. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Now or never. Do it. Make it count. With a screech of metal, Mila's team rammed the hull of the lead Vorran ship with a rigged freighter filled with explosives. The ship erupted into flames, debris scattering into the cold vacuum of space. As the Vorrans scrambled to regroup, their communication systems fried by the sudden blast. Human fighters shot through the chaos, picking off stragglers. It was over in a matter of minutes. The remaining Vorran ships were forced into retreat, crippled by surprise and human determination. The asteroid field, once a graveyard, became the grave of the Vorran's confidence. Lena stood, watching the fading remnants of the battle through the view screen. Get me a direct line to the fleet, she said, her voice hoarse. And make sure everyone knows this wasn't a fluke. This was human ingenuity. We fight, and we win. Transmission ready, Captain, Asha replied. The words came out before she could stop them. Guess we are the pests after all. Lena smirked, her eyes narrowing as she leaned closer to the comms. To the Vorrans and the rest of the galaxy, you've just seen what happens when you underestimate humanity. As the message broadcast across the galaxy, Lena finally allowed herself a moment of relief. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they'd won. For now, Lena stood at the bridge's viewport, eyes fixed on the stars as they streaked by. The Peregrine had been limping for days, its hull scarred and cracked from the battle in the asteroid belt. The victory had been hard-earned, but the price had been steep. The Vorrans were retreating temporarily. Lena knew better than to think they had won. She could feel it in her gut. They were just getting started. Captain? Ash's voice broke through her thoughts. The lieutenant's voice was tight, the tension in her words unmistakable. We've detected something. It's not just another Vorran ship. It's Different. Lena turned toward her, frowning. Different how? Ash's fingers flew across the console. I'm not sure. It doesn't match any known signature. It's coming in fast straight at us. More of their ships? Lena asked, her voice low. No, Asha said, her voice shaking. This isn't a ship. It's something. Alive. Before Lena could respond, the ship shuddered violently. The whole room was thrown into chaos as the ship's alarm screamed. Shields failing. We're taking hits. Milo's voice came through the comms. Incoming. The bridge rocked again, and then everything went silent. Lena's heart hammered in her chest as the crew scrambled to assess the damage. The hull was still holding together, but the Peregrine was clearly at the mercy of whatever had come to find them. Report, Lena said, voice hard. Ash's fingers flew over her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's not one ship, it's them. She paused, looking up at Lena. Super soldiers. They're Vorran, but not like any soldiers we've faced before. Lena's eyes narrowed. She knew the Vorrans had a reputation for their advanced technology, their cold, calculating precision. But this was something else. Show me, Lena said, voice tight with both urgency and dread. Asha complied, pulling up the data on the VIU screen. The image that appeared was enough to make even the hardened soldiers on the bridge pause. What appeared were human-like figures, but there was something off about them. They were too muscular, too fast, their movements unnaturally fluid. Their armor gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, and the weapons they wielded seemed almost part of their bodies. We've encountered these things before, Asha continued, her voice strained. These soldiers genetically modified, enhanced beyond anything we've seen. The Vorrans must have bred them specifically to fight humanity. They're engineered for one thing, destruction. Lena's stomach twisted. Vorran super soldiers. They were no longer fighting just a fleethy. We're fighting a race of monsters bred specifically to erase humanity. And they were coming for them. The VIU from the VIU port shifted as one of the super soldiers leapt from the dark void, rocketing toward the Peregrine. Lena's eyes locked onto the figure, watching as it landed on the hull with the force of a freight train, its armored fists pounding against the ship's structure. Sparks flew from the impact, and Lena knew in that instant their defenses wouldn't hold. Get us moving, Asha, Lena barked. Full evasive maneuvers. We can't, Asha shouted. The damage is too much. We won't outrun them. Lena's jaw clenched, her mind racing. They were going to have to fight. They had no choice. Priya, can you get us a shot? Lena called out, her eyes never leaving the screen. Priya's voice crackled over the comms. I've got the targeting systems online, but these things tire fast. I can't guarantee a clean shot. I'll take anything, Lena said. Now, as the super soldiers started to breach the outer hull, the crew scrambled. There was no time for hesitation. Lena had already seen the way they moved too fast, too deadly, like shadows in a nightmare. The first super soldier smashed through a section of the hull, and in the next instant, it was inside the ship. It moved with lightning speed, its glowing eyes scanning the bridge like a predator hunting prey. The crew reacted too slowly, but Milo was the first to fire. His shot struck the super soldier in the shoulder, but it didn't even slow it down. The Vorran beast retaliated, slamming Milo into the bulkhead with the force of a wrecking ball, knocking him unconscious in an instant. No, Asha screamed, reaching for her sidearm. But Lena was already moving. Her instincts kicked in as she dove for the nearest weapon locker. We're not losing anyone else, Lena muttered to herself, hands flying as she pulled out a plasma rifle. Not today. The battle on the bridge was chaotic. The super soldiers seemed to multiply, each one faster, stronger than the last. But humanity had something they couldn't predict: desperation. Lena and her crew fought with everything they had, using their surroundings, their ingenuity. No matter how fast or brutal the enemy was, they wouldn't give up. They couldn't. As the fight raged, the realization hit Lena like a thunderclap. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the very future of humanity, and they weren't going down without a fight. The Peregrine was a ship on the edge, wounded, battered, her engines running at half capacity, and her crew hanging on by sheer willpower. Lena stood alone in the dimly lit war room, the hum of the ship's failing systems the only sound. Her mind was running a mile a minute, recalculating, rethinking, trying to grasp for a plan that could keep humanity from slipping into oblivion. The door slid open behind her, and Lieutenant Asha stepped in, her face drawn and pale. "Captain," she said, her voice tight, "the Vorran fleet is regrouping. The super soldiers are only the beginning. They're sending more. This isn't a raid anymore. It's a full-on extermination." Lena nodded without turning. The weight of those words crushed her chest, but she wasn't about to show it. "We'll stop them. We have to." Asha stepped closer, hesitating. "And if we can't, what then, Captain? What's our fallback plan?" Lena finally turned, locking eyes with Asha. She could see the fear there, the doubt, but it wasn't the time for that. Not now. Not when humanity's future was hanging by a thread. Fallback plans are for people who think they're going to lose. Lena's voice was steel. "We're going to win this, and we're going to do it our way." Asha stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, her shoulders squaring. "What's the plan?" Lena exhaled slowly, gathering her thoughts. "We don't have the luxury of a direct assault. The Vorrans will crush us before we can even make it within firing range. But we have something they don't unpredictable. We can't fight them on their terms. So, we won't." Lena walked over to the central table, where the tactical map of their current situation was projected in a hologram. Her crew gathered around, tired eyes but steely resolve in their gazes. "We know the Vorran ship's patterns. We've studied their by oro they calculate their moves, how they respond to different strategies. But they've never faced us." She tapped the table, and the image zoomed in on a cluster of asteroids near the Vorran fleet. "This is where we fight back. We'll use the asteroid belt as cover to get in close. Then, we hit them from inside, blindside them with everything we've got." Priya, the ship's engineer, looked up from the corner where she had been listening intently, her eyes burning with determination. "You're talking about ambushing them with no backup ships. Just us." Lena met her gaze. "Exactly. The Vorrans expect a predictable move. They think we'll keep running, trying to regroup, trying to conserve strength. But they'll be wrong. They won't see us coming. The moment we catch them off guard is the moment we start turning the tide." The room fell into a heavy silence. The crew knew the odds, and they knew what was at stake. They had been fighting for survival. But now, Lena was talking about something far bigger. "I don't need to remind you that this is going to be risky," Lena continued. "We may not make it out, but what's the alternative? Do we just roll over and let the Vorrans decide when we die? No, we're going to take the fight to them. We're going to make sure they know that humanity doesn't lie down. We stand tall, and we fight with everything we've got." A heavy pause followed, then Sergeant Milo spoke up, his voice a low growl. "What's the first move?" Lena's lips twisted into a tight smile. "The decoy. We'll use the peregrine as the bait. We'll lure them in close enough that they'll think they've trapped us. Then, when they're distracted by the decoy, the real strike begins. We will slip past, using the asteroid fields to get inside their defenses. Once we're inside their defenses, we strike at their command hub. If we can take that out, their fleet falls apart." Priya's hands were already moving over her console, as if she were mentally calculating the energy demands. "We'll need a full recharge on the weapon systems, Captain, and an impulse to disable their shields. But we're talking about a lot of risk here." Lena nodded, her gaze hard. "The risks are necessary. No EMP pulse means we don't get close enough to make a real hit, and no hit means we don't survive." She turned, facing each of them. "Are you with me?" The room went still. Then, slowly, each member of the crew nodded, one by one. There was no more room for hesitation. There was no more room for doubt. They were past that point. Lena looked back at the map, then up to the crew. "Then we fight, and we win." The peregrine shuddered as it entered the dense asteroid field, the hull creaking under the strain of the evasive maneuvers. Every fiber of the ship seemed to groan in protest. but it held. For now, Lena stood at the command console. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the massive holographic map of the surrounding space flicker before her. The crew was spread out, each member focused, each knowing their part. This was it, the moment where they either proved humanity's place in the galaxy or were wiped from existence. Shields are holding at 60%, Priya reported, her voice tight but steady. The engineer was glued to her station, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship was on borrowed time, and they all knew it. Ash's voice came next. Enemy ships are in position. Their fleet is Movian, trying to box us in. We don't have much time. Lena didn't look away from the hologram. How far? 5 minutes. Maybe less, Asha said, a hint of urgency creeping into her voice. The countdown had already begun. Lena's mind was racing. Every second was precious. Every moment they waited was another chance for the Vorrans to outflank them, to trap them. The asteroid field was their only chance, of only way to get close enough to strike at the Vorrans' command hub. But even that was a double-edged sword. The dense rock field was a perfect cover for ambush, but it was also a death trap. We go now, Lena said, her voice quiet but commanding. Priya, fire up the decoy. I want them on our tail the second we leave this field. Priya's fingers flew across her console, and the decoy sheep a modified freighter. HFY disguise shot off into the void, its engines flaring as it surged into the heart of the Vorran fleet's formation. The decoy ship, rigged to mimic the Peregrine's signature, began broadcasting false signals, luring the Vorrans into pursuit. Lena's gaze remained fixed on the screen. The moment of truth was here. Asha, get us Movian. Full speed, straight toward the heart of their fleet. No hesitation. Ash's hands were already at the controls, the tension in her face evident. Understood, Captain. All systems are go. The Peregrine surged forward, engines roaring to life as the ship hurled out of the cover of the asteroid field. The decoy had done its job already, the Vorran ships returning, their weapons primed as they locked onto the false signal. Lena's breath caught in her throat as they broke through the field and into open space. The enemy was distracted, just as she'd hoped. Their focus was on the decoy. For a fleeting moment, the galaxy held its breath. But it wouldn't hold for long. We're clear, Asha reported, her voice trembling with barely contained adrenaline. Movian into position. Lena's jaw clenched. They were in position now, but there was no turning back. She had to make sure the rest of the crew knew what was at stake. Get the EMP ready, Priya. This is our one shot. Almost there, Captain, Priya called back, her voice steady even as she worked furiously. One more pass, and I can disable their shields. A loud bang rattled the ship as a Vorran destroyer locked onto their rear. The Peregrine lurched, but it held together. The crew was too focused to flinch. EMPs charged and ready, Priya reported. We can fry their systems in 30 seconds. Lena gave a sharp nod. Do it. The moment Priya triggered the EMP, the lights across the bridge flickered, then went out completely. The Peregrine went dark, and then the distant Vorran ships began to tremble. Vorran fleet shields are down, Asha shouted, her eyes wide with surprise. We've got them. We've really got them. Lena's eyes gleamed with a mix of relief and ruthless determination. This was their opening, their only chance. Milo, you're up. Take your team and hit their command hub. Sergeant Milo, his face a mask of grim determination, grabbed his gear. His eyes never leaving Lena's. You got it, Cap. We'll be in and out, fast as hell. Good, Lena said, her voice cold. No room for error. We take their command. We take their fleet. Milo nodded, his usual cocky grin replaced with a deadly seriousness. He and his team rushed out of the bridge, heading to the hangar where the dropships awaited. As the Peregrine shuddered again, this time from enemy fire, Lena stood motionless, staring at the chaos unfolding around her. This was the final push. If they succeeded, the Vorrans would be forced to acknowledge humanity's power. If they failed, it would be the end. Engage evasive maneuvers, Lena ordered. We're going in. The Peregrine darted through space, weaving between the remaining Vorran ships. dodging laser fire as the crew held their breath. And then, in the distance, the flicker of the command hub. Their target, the final assault was on. The Peregrine shuddered violently as another round of Vorran fire slammed into its hull. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the bridge flickered under the strain of overloaded systems. Yet, despite the relentless barrage, Lena Harker stood unshaken, her hands gripping the command console, her face a mask of determination. "Shields holding at 30%, Asha shouted, her voice sharp with stress. "We can't take many more of these, it's Captain." Lena didn't look away from the view screen, her gaze locked on the Vorran flagship. It was a massive, gleaming behemoth, its weapon systems fully charged, and its focus now squarely on the Peregrine. The other Vorran ships were in disarray, their shields still flickering after the imp strike. But the flagship heart of their comet remained untouched, its weapons firing with deadly precision. "Priya, how's the EMP pulse holding up?" Lena asked, her voice low, controlled. Priya's fingers flew over her console. "I'm rerouting power to the pulse generators, but it's almost fried. I can't guarantee it'll work again, Captain." "Understood," Lena said, the steel in her voice cutting through the chaos. She turned toward the rest of the bridge crew. "Asha, I need you to push us in closer. We're going straight for the command hub. No evasions, no second chances." Asha hesitated for a split second, then nodded, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. "On it, full throttle." The Peregrine lurched forward, engines roaring as it shot straight at the Vorran flagship, a wild, reckless dive into the heart of enemy fire. It was a gamble nothing short of suicidal, but it was the only play they had left. Lena knew they couldn't outrun the Vorrans. Their only hope was to get in close, disable the flagship's command center, and destroy its control of the fleet. "We'll have to board it," Lena muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "Milo and his team will have to breach the flagship's hull. It's their only chance to destroy the command hub." Ash's voice was tight with disbelief. "Captain, we're talking about infiltrating the heart of the Vorran fleet. We're talking about getting inside a ship that's fully armed and armored." Lena's eyes met hers, unwavering. "We've fought the impossible before. We'll do it again." The crew exchanged looks, fear, uncertainty, but also something else, defiance. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity was here to stay. The Peregrine was a small, unremarkable vessel compared to the Vorran flagship. Its dark, jagged hull was dwarfed by the gleaming, menacing form of the alien ship. But Lena had never cared about size. It was about how you used what you had. A piercing alarm rang through the bridge as the ship drew closer to the flagship. "Weapons fire incoming," Asha shouted, her fingers a blur on the console. Lena clenched her jaw. "Priya, get the weapons ready. This is it. We'll punch through their defenses with everything we've got." Priya's voice rang out with purpose. "All power to the front cannons. I'm pushing the ship's power to its limit." "Do it," Lena barked. The Peregrine rocked again as it closed the gap. But this time, it was different. The Vorrans had no idea what they were walking into. They thought humanity was a weak, disorganized force. But they had underestimated one thing: the raw, unpredictable brilliance of humans when they were cornered. Lena's eyes locked onto the view screen as the Peregrine launched a final barrage, sending every remaining missile and laser blast at the Vorran flagship. The shots landed in rapid succession, breaching the shields and ripping through the hull. The Vorran flagship groaned under the assault, its shields flickering as the outer hull began to melt. And then, in the chaos, Lena saw a moment of opportunity. "Milo, you're up," she said, voice steady but full of urgency. In the blink of an eye, Milo's team was ready. The doors to the hangar slid open, and Lena watched as the drop pods were deployed. Each soldier would face unimaginable odds to board the flagship and destroy its heart. It was a suicide mission, but humanity had never been afraid of those. The drop pods shot toward the enemy flagship, cutting through the chaos of fire and debris. As they neared their target, Lena whispered under her breath, "For humanity." The peregrine was nothing more than a husk of what it had once been. Its hull was peppered with dents, scorch marks, and the jagged scars of battle. But Lena stood on the bridge, her eyes still sharp, her posture still commanding. The fight wasn't over, but somehow, it felt like the beginning of something bigger. The Vorran flagship's wreckage spun in the void, a gutted titan leaking fire and smoke. Its once invincible hull now a drifting ruin. Lena Harker stood at the peregrine's console, hands steady, eyes tracing the carnage. Hours ago, it had been untouchable. Now, it was humanity's trophy. The assault had been savage. Milo's team had breached the command hub, wiring its core to blow. He'd grinned over the comms for my kid brother, Cap, before the line went dead. The blast had shattered the Vorran fleet, scattering them like spook prey. Victory, but at a cost that clawed at Lena's gut. Captain, Asha rasped, stepping up, her eyes red. Milo's team, only to made it back. He's gone. Lena's chest tightened, Milo's scar-flash grin flashing in her mind. He knew the odds, she said, voice rough. He bought us the future. Priya burst in, breathless. Lena, the archivite's not just old tech. It's a map to a human weapon, buried since the Council erased our ancestors. The Vorrans knew they'd been hunting it. Lena's gaze snapped to her. The stakes just tripled. Then we find it first. She hit the comms, voice iron. Broadcast this, galaxy-wide. Humanity is done begging. You kicked us down. Now watch us rise from your flagship's corpse. The signal flared, a middle finger to the stars. Asha whispered, they'll come for us harder now. Let them, Lena said, a feral edge to her smile. We're just getting started. Lena turned slowly, meeting Ash's gaze. What's our status? Ash's fingers flew over the console. The fleet is in disarray. We've taken down their command center. The remaining Vorran ships are retreating either back into the fringes or scattering into the void. Their leadership is shattered, Captain. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all. The Vorrans, a galaxy's most powerful race, had been toppled. But this wasn't just about them. It was about something bigger. About securing a future for humanity. A future that didn't depend on the whims of an alien council that had never given them a chance. We've won, Asha said, her voice a mix of disbelief and awe. We've really done it. Lena nodded, her face set with the quiet, grim satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed the impossible. We've won, she repeated, as if saying it out loud made it real. But this is just the beginning. There was a pause before Asha spoke again, her voice tentative. What now? Lena turned back to the Vayu screen, watching as the Vorran ships faded into the distance. Like a nightmare that was finally receding. The weight of everything, deaths, the battles, the sacrificing heavy on her shoulders. But there was no time to mourn. There was only forward. We rebuild, she said quietly. We show the galaxy that humanity isn't just a force to be reckoned with. We're going to take our place at that table. And this time, no one is going to tell us we don't belong. The crew on the bridge stood in silence, the magnitude of Lena's words settling in. They had done the impossible, and they had done it together. Humanity was no longer an afterthought in the galaxy. They had proven themselves worthy of respect. Lena's eyes swept over her crew, each of them battered but unbroken. They had taken on an entire fleet and emerged victorious. They had paid the price, but they had claimed their future. Asha broke the silence, her voice quieter now. You know they won't forget this. They won't forgive us. Lena met her gaze, a small smile playing at the edges of her lips. Good, she said. Let them remember. Let them fear what happens when they underestimate humanity. As the peregrine drifted through the stars, the crew stood tall, knowing the fight was far from over. The galaxy might never be the same again, but neither would humanity. The future was theirs.